All right. Welcome back, everyone. Have a return guest. Actually, I have Lindsay Stamp here, and we connected over X a while back. And I've been noticing some interesting tweets or posts from her on X. So I want to follow up and catch up and see how she's doing. So welcome, Lindsay.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah. So let's catch up. So what are you working on and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, I not a whole lot of change, I guess, from the last time we talked. I still working on, my normal 9 to 5 and working through some, promotional opportunities at my company. Still into real estate, still have my rental properties. We have a flip underway that we're hoping is going to be completed this summer, and then we're probably, going to sell it as opposed to keeping it and holding it as a rental. Um, and otherwise, just normal life stuff. How are you?
Cool.
How's things with
Good.
you?
I'm good. I'm busy. I went to the one rental at a time event in Vegas in February. That was really good. And then I saw that, you were also on Zuber's channel. So that must have been exciting. I see
Yeah,
you on a lot more podcasts too. I think you're on Aaron. Were you at Aaron Amin's
I
hybrid real
was.
estate, right? I saw that. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
blowing up but it also seems you're at a little crossroads. So kind of that's why I reached out. I want to touch base because I've been noticing a little more of your posts kind of Bitcoin based and kind of there was one interesting one. You talked about how an investor, approached you with kind of a seller finance type deal option and you're kind of on the fence a little bit about it. So let's kind of dig into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say like around last year, like around November of last year. So it's only been what, 6, 7 months ago. I started like just being interested and intrigued in Bitcoin and learning about it. And I really didn't know much about it. I bought some Bitcoin like back in the day, like I think I bought some in like 2019 and 2021 and held on to it for a little bit and sold it. But I really didn't know what I owned and I didn't know anything about it. I just at that time had bought it because other people had bought it and told me to buy it. So I really started like looking into it kind of on a deeper level and trying to learn more about it and reading books and watching podcasts, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos. Kind of went down the whole rabbit hole as the Bitcoin people say, and I'm fascinated by it. I really am. Like just this form of digital property. Some people call it currency, asset, digital asset, whatever you want to call it. For me, I'm not the type of person that at this stage in my life is going to sell all of my assets and go in 100% on Bitcoin, which I know several people who have done that. But at the same time, I also think it does have a place in my portfolio. And being someone who's historically invested in real estate and in stocks, like you know majority of my portfolio is still real estate, and then the second highest is stocks and index funds, and Bitcoin is the lowest amount money wise that I have invested in that particular asset. And so for me, it's more about buying more of that to increase my allocation, my exposure to Bitcoin, now that I understand it and fully believe in it. So it's been an interesting journey these last 6 months for sure, just kind of change in mindset, change in opinions, beliefs, that kind of thing. But to answer your question about the being at the crossroads and the property, I own a property on one specific street, and a family member of mine owns other houses on that same street. And so we know other people that own properties there and who have tenants and things like that. And there is an investor who's in his 60s and he's ready to retire. He's ready to hang it up, and he's like tired of just dealing with the things that come with real estate. And so he just approached me one day when we were both over there, like working on our properties, and he was just wanted to know if I was interested in buying three of his places, two row houses and then one that's a single family home across the street. And we kind of talked about what he was looking to get out of the places, and we didn't go into detail about seller financing type of details, just more of like a preliminary discussion, like, hey, would you be interested in buying these? And I've kind of just like been up in the air about it, like I just am at the point where I have 4 properties. I feel like that's a good amount for me as somebody who has a 9 to 5. My wife has a 9 to 5. We self manage, so it does take up quite a bit of our time. And thinking through taking on one, two, or three more places, more tenants, the money it would take, as far as down payment, eventual renovations. The properties are older. The tenants that we would inherit that have been, in long-term leases. All of that stuff is what is crossing my mind and making me think like, do I want to go through with this or do I want to pass?
Yeah, no, it's super interesting because it seems like, you've kind of found like the holy grail of like what a lot of real estate investors are trying to find right now, right? A seller finance deal, that cash flows and things like that. But yet you're at a crossroads, and I think that's where, even investors that get into real estate at some point, it starts crossing their mind too about like you're saying, right? How much time are you putting in? If you're self-managing, even the maintenance, right? It's never, you go a couple months where you don't have anything, and then they all start piling up on you. So those are things that we always have to think about. And it's interesting that, like, for me, I'm primarily real estate, but I also feel like what you're talking about, where it's like, oh, do I want to deal with any more maintenance issues or tenant issues? And where, like, Bitcoin is kind of something where, you kind of just invest in it and you ride it out, right? So that's super interesting. But like, what, I guess, like you said, you invested in Bitcoin, back, end of last year. But what kind of maybe really took you down that rabbit hole? Was there like someone you were following or anything else? Oh, who's that?
That's Franklin. That's my
Oh,
dog.
okay.
And anytime I'm in here, he always has to be involved. So, um, yeah, I would say like there are a few people on Twitter actually that I think are fully into Bitcoin and fully believed in it. People that I really respected, that I know, and that I've talked to, quite a bit, and they just urged me to like do my own research. Like they didn't say like, Lindsay, just buy Bitcoin. They said like, Lindsay, just start looking into it, and you will probably come to the same conclusion that a lot of other people have come to. And for me, I think I realized that there's a lot of people who I think are smarter than me, who really understand it and believe in it. And I started asking myself, like, what do I not understand about it that I'm not convicted by it? And what do these other smart people know that I don't know at this point? Like, it was just one of those things where, you see people like, obviously well known, like Michael Saylor, like what he's doing with MicroStrategy. And it just had me thinking, like, he's extremely smart, a CEO of a major company. Like he's fully into it. And what does he know about it that I don't? And that's what I started like really looking into it. Um, I still see the benefits of real estate. I still see the benefits of owning an asset that is going to pay you monthly. Um, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dog barking
That's
in the
okay. Don't
background.
worry about it. Yeah.
Um, but owning an asset that you don't have to sell off, that's going to pay you money monthly that you can, use to live, and then also have a property that's going to appreciate. You can sell it down the line if you want. You can refinance it. You can pull money out. Like there are still a lot of benefits of real estate, and the tax benefits that come with real estate are huge as well. I think the bigger thing that I focus on and I've been looking into is just the overall debasement of the US dollar, the currency going down in value, like houses that have appreciated, hundreds of thousands of dollars over just the last 4 years. Like, did those houses get more valuable, or did the value of our dollar go down? And so when you start like looking into the fact that like some crazy number, like, 80% of all US dollars in circulation have been printed since 2020, you start to realize that something majorly has changed since 2020, since the pandemic, when we started printing money and handing out stimulus checks and stimulating the economy during what would have been probably a major downturn. Things start to make a little bit more sense. And so, I still believe in stocks. I still invest in stocks every single week. I still buy index funds. I still have a 401k. I still have a Roth IRA, all of these things. I would say that previously I put Bitcoin out of sight, out of mind as something that I didn't really care about, didn't care to know about. all of those things people say it's a scam, it's a greater fool theory, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's like all of those things. It's to me, it's not all of those things, and it deserves a place in almost everybody's portfolio at some allocation, whether that's 1%, 2, 5, 10, 50. That's your decision. But I've just, come to realize like Bitcoin has been the best performing asset for the last decade. 8 out of the last, 11 years, it's been the best performing asset. And the people that have owned it haven't had to deal with ovens, toilets, tenants not paying rent, property taxes going up, like all of those things that you and I deal with on a regular basis. It just becomes, a little bit more attractive when you think of it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think I also there was an interesting one you also posted. I think it was about kind of a um I can't seem to find it right now, but I think you talked about like a kind of a drip method that you have this kind of vision now, like investing enough in this asset class to where hopefully it grows to a certain point where kind of just people talk about real estate and the cash flow that you need to survive off of, but you're kind of slightly not changing, but just using this asset class as kind of like a drip method to provide you, income or cash flow when you are retired. So I found that interesting. Is that kind of something that you kind of came across also when you kind of started going down the rabbit hole for the Bitcoin side?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, what I'll say right now today is that I have no future plans to sell the Bitcoin that I have. I think when you understand Bitcoin, what you understand is that there will only ever be 21 million coins, and a few million of those coins have been lost. So there's really only like 19 million coins, and there's never going to be any more. And when you sell yours to other people who are planning to hold theirs, eventually it's going to get harder to buy it because you're either going to have to pay more money or you're going to have to provide like a good or service to obtain it. And so when you think about like when you start to really understand Bitcoin, it's like it is kind of a race to how much you can accumulate while it's still available, kind of thing, kind of mindset. And the price is volatile. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. I'm not saying like the price is going to go up like in the short term forever, but I believe in the long term, the price is going to go up forever. Just the simple fact of more people are learning about it, more people want to own it. The demand for Bitcoin is going up, and the supply is what it is. It's not like the US dollar where it can just be printed and there's more of it and there's an unlimited infinite supply of it, which I think is really cool about it. My thought process around using it down the line is like when you're buying Bitcoin, a few years ago, it might have taken 15 Bitcoin to buy a house. You might have needed 15 Bitcoin or 20 Bitcoin or 50 Bitcoin to buy a house. Now you need, I don't know, in our area where we invest, 3, 4. And in the future, as the price of Bitcoin goes up, the amount that you need to purchase things is going to go down. And so one of my favorite content creators around the Bitcoin space says like in the future, a house might cost 0.1 Bitcoin. The amount of Bitcoin it takes to buy things that you need is going to go down, as opposed to with the US dollar, the amount of money that you need to buy something is going to go up. And that's a really like interesting shift in the mindset of, if I buy one Bitcoin right now for $60,000 and in 20 or 30 years, one Bitcoin's $1 million, I can sell off 0.1 of my Bitcoin for 100 grand and, just sell it off in small chunks, just like you would at the 4% rule of your stock portfolio. People selling it, but the actual nest egg value doesn't go down because it continues to appreciate. And so I think it's like that mindset of, as the price goes up, you can sell some off in small chunks if you so choose and still have your main holding, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was
No.
a roundabout answer to get to where I was going.
No, yeah, like I said, I'm really I know I started noticing some of your posts a little more Bitcoin based, and I found it super interesting because previously, like you said, we mainly talked about real estate and whatnot, but I do find it interesting, just even being on X, right? There's just so many people doing different things out there, And there's not a wrong way or a right way to do it. It's just interesting to see how people are coming across these different asset classes and whatnot. Um, I guess for me, maybe have you ever considered like buying real estate and then collecting rent in Bitcoin?
Oh yeah, I've actually thought about that. I was talking to somebody on Twitter about that like a day or two ago. Like, should I offer a 5% discount on rent if they pay me in Bitcoin? That's cool. At this point, like I don't do that. I just take the money that I get from rent and buy Bitcoin with it. But it would be really cool, like if they could just send to my wallet Bitcoin for rent. I would love that. I don't think my current tenants are too savvy about Bitcoin, and I don't think that they'd be in on that now. But I could see that changing in the future. Like, you know, I think a lot of Bitcoin is kind of generational at this point. Like if you have older tenants that, aren't accustomed to this, I feel like it would be more of like an inconvenience for them to try to figure out how to do it to send it to me. Whereas like if my tenants were my age, like I feel like that would be easy.
Yeah. So you also you touched on like dealing with tenants, toilets, maintenance is part of maybe the thought process on why, you're not sure how much more real estate you may want. But I think also part of it too is it seems like, you're having you're up for promotion, I believe, in your W-2. And that's also, why Michael Zuber, One Rent at a Time, really likes what you're doing, right? Because you're kind of putting that message out there that you don't have to quit your job or you don't have to retire early. Like you're really focusing on leveraging your W-2 to build your wealth. And is that also part of it? Like you're getting busy on that W-2 side where like you're saying the self-managing, the maintenance, those type of things. You're like, I don't know where that balance is anymore.
Yes, that is a main part of it. Like I value my W-2 a lot, and I think that that's kind of an unpopular opinion on social media nowadays because there's a lot of hate for people that have 9 to 5 or that just value their 9 to 5. But um, you know, I think that and that exactly what I talked about with Michael is like most people's best chance at building wealth is simply having a good 9 to 5. And that doesn't mean like you're 22, you graduate from college, and you are making $100,000 a year. That's not what I mean. I mean graduating with a degree at 22 and getting a job somewhere at a good company and working your way up over the course of years, decades, whatever it is. You don't have to work there until you're 65 if you don't want to. If you're smart with your money. If you're not smart with your money, you will probably end up working there forever. But in my case, like I got a job at 22 making $55,000 a year. And at 22, that was a lot of money. That was in 2015, and I had never had that much money in my life. And over the last 8, 9 years now, I've been promoted 4 times, and I'm working on a fifth one right now. And I've had a lot of jobs, over a short amount of time, a year or two in a position, and then move along for more money. And currently, like I say this in the most humble way possible, I never thought that 8 years ago, if you would have told me I'd graduate with a degree in criminology and be making the kind of money I'm making today at my company, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. But it's possible. There's a lot of money to be made out there in Fortune 100 companies or Fortune 500 companies that have great benefits, great schedules, and good salaries. And that's exactly my strategy. Use the salary I make from my 9 to 5 to buy assets that are going to pay me more money, and I don't think there's one right way. When I post about Bitcoin always I get comments from people saying, my friends are rich and they don't own any Bitcoin. My friends are all super wealthy and they have been wealthy for years and they never needed Bitcoin. Why do they need it now? There's more than one way to build wealth. Building wealth is simply taking the money you make, no matter how you make it, and using it to buy assets that will bring you more money later down the road. That could be land, it could be properties, it could be businesses, it could be stocks, it could be Bitcoin. It can be anything. I think the landscape of the financial picture has changed in the last few years to where it's harder for young people to tap into real estate, to tap into buying land, to tap into, especially in places like where you live. Like, are there young 20 somethings buying homes in Hawaii? I mean, I don't know, but I think it would be tough. Can young 20 somethings in Hawaii buy pieces of Bitcoin at a time and dollar cost average over the course of months or years and eventually have a nice stack that is historically over the last 15 years appreciated very nicely? Yeah. So my focus is my 9 to 5 because I know that that's where my money is going to come to buy the things that are going to make me wealthy long term. And when I realize that I can buy a property that'll cash flow $200 a month or $300 a month, or I can get a promotion at my 9 to 5 that's going to pay me 25,000 more a year or 30,000 more a year, that's where I should be focusing my energy because that's going to pay off a lot more in the long run than a property for $200 a month that'll pay me $2,400 a year minus maintenance minus everything else that goes into it. I would need 10 of those, to outpace one promotional bump at the company that I'm working for. And so that's kind of where my mindset is at of focusing on what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, great points. I think you brought up some great things, and I think that's why Bitcoin is soaring. Also, the stock market is, like you said, real estate is expensive right now. Rates are high. It is harder for people to find deals out there. Like you talked, even maintenance costs are a lot higher, property taxes, insurance. So like you said, people can start buying assets at fractional, like Bitcoin and dollar cost averaging. So I think that's also why these asset classes are doing so well, is because, like you said, people are kind of veering away from real estate a little bit because it is harder to get into right now. So that's a great point too on why, like you said, there's no right way to do it. And I also think it's also, like you said, it's knowing yourself too, right? Like not everyone can handle the volatility of Bitcoin. And then some people, that's just not for them. But the same token is like real estate is not for everyone because they don't want to deal with the maintenance or the tenant issues. So it's really understanding, yourself and what asset class fits best for you. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
love catching up. I love what you've been doing. I really want to dig deeper into this, and I hope, when you do decide on what you're gonna do with this possible seller finance type option, we can catch up again. But
Yeah.
before we wrap things up, I know, you did play college basketball, and I know that's one of the other passions that you do have. But I'm wondering, like, Caitlin Clark's been in the news a lot, and I'm wondering like why there's so much hate and bashing on her.
It's a great question, Mark. It really is. Like, to me, like this is just one person's opinion. I could be way off base. I think it's jealousy. Like, I think people don't like the amount of publicity she's gotten. They don't like how much she's been interviewed and on commercials and the deals that she's getting. And I think there was a lot of like animosity for her getting an 8-figure Nike deal and all that kind of stuff. But I like her. I went to the national championship game. Me and my wife went and, you know, against South Carolina, and it was incredible. Like seeing her play in person, she's every bit as good as, anybody else that I've seen play in women's basketball. And
You could have
she's
stopped her, right?
fun. Of
No.
course. She makes it fun. I think more people are tuning into women's basketball because of her. And I think they're going to have more sales in the WNBA and jersey sales and ticket sales and, people coming to see her play, which is only good for the sport. And I definitely don't understand the hate, but to each their own, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Before we go, you did bring up, you went to the national championship game with your wife. How does your wife feel about the Bitcoin space, or is she kind of just whatever asset class, you're kind of investing in, or she has a different feel for it right now?
Yeah, I think like watching her transition, you know, through me learning about Bitcoin and talking to her about it, like it's been interesting to see her opinion change on it too. Like over the last few months, it was hilarious. She was in Canada for work, and she was up there for about a week. And one of the nights, I was here to hold the dogs and doing stuff around the house, and I grabbed my phone and I had a text from her that says, "Send more money to Bitcoin every month." And I was just like, yes, let's go. But she sees the value in it. I mean, I think I've said this before, and I don't know if it was on your podcast or another one, but she trusts me, and so I think that she knows that like I would never make a hasty decision with our money or a reckless decision with our money. I think, we've been together for 10 years, and I think over the course of 10 years, we've gone from being way in debt to paying off debt to buying assets to real estate to stocks to growing our income at our 9 to 5 to buying Bitcoin. Like we've kind of been through all of those ebbs and flows together. And the more I learn about it and the more convicted I am, the more I think she gets on board and sees the value in it too. And she's interested in it. And we buy it every single week and sometimes extra. And sometimes she's just like, hey, do you want to send 100 to Bitcoin? I'm like, sure, do it. So it's fun.
So you folks are not the crypto bulls, right? You're just Bitcoin bull.
Bitcoin only.
Okay, cool. Well, as
Yeah.
long as you're still nice on X to me, you're not gonna be one of those people that if someone posts something about Bitcoin or crypto and then they're just mean, those people.
I would never. There's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of people that just only believe in Bitcoin, and that's cool. That's great. But I, like I said before, I don't think there's just one way of investing. For me, there's not even one way. I want to be diversified. I want to have some exposure to everything, and if one thing does great, and if another thing simultaneously doesn't do as well, it's okay because I have other things to balance it out. So I'm never a hater on social media. I don't do that. So all
All
good
right.
on my end.
All right. Well, I love what you're doing. I'm glad to see you're getting out there, doing more podcasts and getting exposure more, but you're doing great stuff and I love what you put out there. And yeah,
Thank
gotta
you.
get yeah. So
You
keep
too.
it up and we'll follow up. Hope maybe we can figure out if you did go through with with that real estate deal, but it sounds like you're
I will
not
let
gonna,
you
I
know.
think. Yeah, I don't think you will.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards not, but I haven't given a final response yet. But I will definitely let you know.
Well, I'm glad we got to catch up before you get promoted. I know you're gonna get it. So you're gonna get
Thank
busier
you.
again. So thanks for doing this, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Mark. You have a good day.
You too. Bye.
See ya.